So let me introduce Mark, who is chairing the panel. Mark Brown is an NSUN associate and the development director of Social Spider, and supports researchers and writes about mental health, social innovation, and social media from the perspective of someone who has experience of mental health difficulties. And today, Mark is chairing our first panel of the day on what do user-led groups need. So, Mark, if I can invite you to turn on your camera and sound. So lovely to see you, and over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending this first session of the second day of NSUN's AGM. We're going to be talking about user-led organisations and what user-led organisations need. I shall have 3 panellists with me for the next hour, and I'll give them a chance to introduce themselves in a second. So for anyone that's at home who's not really familiar with what user-led organisations are, user-led organisations are community organisations, mutual aid organisations, small charities. They're people getting together to sort something out that other people don't want to, that other people don't think is important, or that other people don't have the knowledge and resources to sort out. But what does user-led mean when people who live with mental health distress and trauma aren't users of services, when people never get to have the things they need, when entire communities are at the back of the queue when it comes to having the things in life they need to survive and thrive? We talk about lived experience as being the centre of user-led groups and organisations, but what does that mean? Whose experience and what experience of what? What do user-led groups and organisations mean when the world and their uncle and their aunt are talking about health inequalities and discrimination, but seem helpless to know quite what to do? Can user-led groups make up for the kinds of awful things that happen in people's lives, sometimes at the hands of services that are actually meant to be helping them? This year, in 2020, NSUN did something called the NSUN COVID Fund, where we were lucky enough to be able to distribute very small grants to user-led organisations in communities across England who are doing things for people's mental health during the COVID lockdown, the first COVID lockdown. And what we found doing that was that there were loads of people and groups using their lived experience across the country to make things better for others. So for this discussion, what we're going to be focusing on is the fact that user-led groups and organisations exist now, and they're doing things now with people, solving problems that people have now. And we're going to be asking the question, what do those groups need? So I'm going to give my panellists an opportunity to introduce themselves. I think we should start with Steph. If you're there, give us an idea of who you are, why you do it, and what it is you do.
Hi, thanks, Mark. Yeah, so just so you know, I've got my Zoom filters up to max, so looking good, hopefully. My normal humour at the start of the day. So yeah, Steph Haye. I'm one of the original founders of Survivors of Depression in Transition, SODIT for short. One of the things, obviously, that we did originally, and I wasn't part of the original group, was obviously to get the SODIT acronym, and that was a key thing for us. So I'm the sort of chief executive of the organisation. We're a small charity based in Sheffield, and just to give you a little sort of potted history, after Mark's comments there about what makes a sort of user-led, peer-led organisation, we started off as a group that the NHS started for women with mental health issues and distress, not just depression. And this is about 30 years ago. And what happened was that the NHS at the time basically stopped the group. And the group was saying, like a lot of these things, and how we tend to start off was the fact, well, we actually need to do something for ourselves. And, you know, the group of women got together and we wanted to carry on with this process of mutual peer support. Now, that was the very early days. There was no constitution. It was just basically people getting together and supporting each other, which I think is ultimately at the heart of what we do as a peer support charity organisation. Over that time, there's been lots of iterations of sort of setting up the normal sort of small bank account, etc., those sorts of things, having membership fees and so forth and so forth. And when I actually came along as somebody who needed support myself locally in Sheffield, which was fantastic at the time, and having other women there, just being able to have that conversation and that sort of mutual aid made a big difference. And because I'm that sort of person who's, I guess, quite driven, then we could do more, basically. So we needed to do more. So, you know, we're talking now 26 years ago or so. And what we did then was set up a small charity. And so just to make things, you know, expand when it comes to the services, there were more people that needed support in Sheffield. We wanted to make things, more groups, etc., within Sheffield. And we've got to where we are now, 2020, a very strange year, I have to say. And what we've come through a whole mixture of sort of feelings and situations where we've sort of scraped by. And I think that really has been massively challenging. Trying to keep things going is one of the things that I personally find is a big challenge when it comes to running and organising sort of these organisations. You can have the passion to set things up in the first place, and I think you have that energy and that drive, but to keep it going is something which, again, probably we'll talk about it more, I guess, as we go along. But now we're in a situation where we have the peer support groups. I'm sure we'll talk more a little bit about the COVID-19 situation, where everything is online, apart from some of the counselling we're doing. So we basically have counselling now, we have peer support groups. We also have a helpline specifically for the COVID situation as well, which we didn't have before. We have a lot of placement students, so we support currently 6 counselling placement students, and also currently 4 medical students who are doing their community placement with us. In the past, again, we've supported social work students, other things, to be part of what we're doing. And I think one of the magic that people have expressed is when they've done a placement within the statutory sector and they've come to us and they've said, God, yeah, this is actually really, this is real. This is about people, grassroots, working in the community. We're very much a volunteer-led organisation as well. So we have the odd paid member of staff and our counselling sort of crew, but we're all volunteers. Now, again, people may have different sort of ideas about the volunteering and how you should get paid, those sorts of things. But it's one of the unique things which makes us, I think, more flexible. It helps with our sort of like sustainability, if you like. But also the fact that we have 10, 12 volunteers as well who are working with us and who are absolutely marvellous, all with lived experience of different sort of mental health. So while we're survivors of depression, we support people right across the board when it comes to diagnosis. I use the word in inverted commas, whatever sort of distress that they may come with. And I think we also have a varied mix of women. So the interesting thing about what we're talking about is the transition bit. Now, very much about life transition, although we do support LGBT and the trans community as well over the years. So that's one of the things that we have, that sort of openness about what we're doing. And I know Mark just put his thumb up to say to finish in a bit. But very much so, we're still small, and we've always wanted to be small. And one of the things about starting organisations, and I think this is something I personally find, we don't have to grow all the time. We can actually keep what we do best. And do we need to grow into big, giant organisations? I personally don't think we need to. I think we need to have this sort of really grassroots, small, local, and really, really based within the community that we're serving. So that's just really a little bit of a potted history, a little quick bit about what we do, and I will pass on to Mark and the other panel members. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you for that, Steph. There was quite a lot in that pot for that potted history. Thank you. A lot of stuff going on. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to invite Ursula to explain a bit about herself and her organisation and what they've been doing, because it's similar but different. Over to you, Ursula. You need to unmute yourself.
Sorry, so sorry, so sorry I'm late. Apologies, everyone. So I run Adira, which is a survivor-led mental health and wellbeing service that supports the Black communities. Adira is specifically set up for Black people, simply because we identified that the services that are currently out there, which are predominantly white support mental health services, have a very one-size-fits-all approach to mental health that just doesn't work for us as a community, because first of all, many of us in the Black community, we don't believe in mental health. We don't believe it exists. Behind closed doors, we will say that's a white man's problem. And yet still we are overpopulating the mental health wards. The highest race of people in the mental wards or psychiatric wards with mental health issues are African Caribbean people. So clearly there is a disconnect somewhere. So we don't do mental health, but yet still we're constantly, ending up sectioned. So Adira was set up 8 years ago. We started off, our remit was just supporting single parent families. And then a couple of years ago, we changed our remit to just support the Black community. So that's what Adira does. I am that survivor. I am the managing director of Adira and the founder. I'm a survivor myself of historic trigger warning, historic rape and sexual abuse, which is very commonplace in the Black community. Things like that are passed off as culture or religion or faith. It's not abuse, it's discipline. So Adira was set up to catch Black people who don't do mental health before they reach crisis, before they hit the mental health wards. We were set up to be that safe space because we are culturally appropriate, culturally competent, and culturally sensitive. If somebody walks into a white therapist and says, look, I've got mental health issues because of juju, and this has happened multiple times, and the white therapist says, well, what does that mean? The conversation is over. Because if you don't understand what juju is, or black magic, or voodoo, or witchcraft, which are all the things that we say mental health is, evil eye, somebody's put something on me, that's how we see mental health. If you as a white person doesn't understand that, how can you help me? How can you support me if you don't understand my history, my culture, my faith, my belief? Because all those things are tied into my mental health. So in a nutshell, that's Adira.
Brilliant, thank you. Our third panelist is Shuranjeet. I'd like to give Shuranjeet a chance to introduce what he does and what it's all about.
Awesome, thank you, Mark, and hi everyone. My name is Shuranjeet Singh. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm the founder and director of an organization called Taraki. And Taraki works with Punjabi communities to reshape approaches to mental health. And so just a bit of background about why I started Taraki in October 2017. So I was born and raised in Birmingham, in Handsworth in Birmingham. And my upbringing was in a very, very cosmopolitan community, a very cosmopolitan area. People from different cultures, different kind of backgrounds, all kind of living together and engaging with each other. But then when I transitioned to university, I left Birmingham to go to university. It was a very, very difficult transition. And being someone who can be very visually thought of as other was something that impacted me quite a lot at university, because I was no longer in a space that had the diversity of what I was used to back home. So the mental health challenges I experienced largely at university, and still managing them to this day, really meant that I needed to focus on mental health in a way that I hadn't done previously. I didn't go to my family or my friends back home for support. And what I really did, I looked at the people I had at university, and they were able to create that space. And I was very, very fortunate that they were able to create a space where I felt open, I felt welcome, and I felt as though I could be myself. So in 2017, I was thinking about these experiences, and I was looking in my communities back home and seeing people who were experiencing challenges, but they weren't able to access the same support that I was able to access. So we started Taraki in October 2017. And I always shout out my mom, because my mom came up with the name Taraki. And Taraki means to progress. It's a word found in the Punjabi language, and it's also a word found in different South Asian languages. So currently I run Taraki, and we have a team of about 15 volunteers, and we focus on 4 areas, working with Punjabi communities to reshape approaches to mental health. The first we started with was awareness. We started very initially as a male mental health advocacy project, but soon we realized that awareness wasn't the start and wasn't the end of the conversation. And so we thought, okay, awareness is a good starting point, but let's actually think about how we can move further along that process. So currently we have work streams related to awareness, related to education, related to social support, so different kinds of peer support, and then also more recently related to research. And I, like many others who are leading user-led organizations, don't necessarily have a background in understanding the intricacies about how to develop these types of organizations, how to work with teams of people from around the world, how to work with communities in a way that's non-extractive and non-oppressive. And so it's been a huge, huge learning journey that continues every day. And so I'm excited to kind of think about and reflect on some of the things that user organizations need at the moment. It comes directly from our experiences of working with Punjabi communities in the UK, but also working with Punjabi communities around the world, to see how we can do this work in a way that is reflective, in a way that's being conscientious, and a way that is fundamentally working towards social change.
Awesome, thank you, Shuranjeet. So that's our introductions. Hopefully everyone at home's got an idea of who's on the panel now and who's speaking and where they're speaking from. What I wanted to do next is take our panel through a little bit of a discussion around what's the most difficult things about doing what they do. And that's a kind of way of looking at what user-led organizations might need. So don't know whether it's okay to put you on the spot, Ursula, but to ask, what is the most difficult, or what are the most difficult things about running your organization and working in your community?
Okay. So I think the most difficult thing about running Adira is none of us, because there are 2 of us on the panel that run Adira, 2 directors, and neither of us are people with PhDs or degrees. We know nothing about writing funding bids. We know nothing about doing spreadsheets, income tax, yearly this, yearly that. We are just based on lived experiences. And I am what I call a knees on the ground. I'm not a boots on the ground, knees on the ground person. So you will find me on somebody's kitchen floor, sitting room floor, bedroom floor, wherever I find them at that particular time is where you will find me. So when I have to stop doing that side of it, which I love and which I'm driven by, because that's my own lived experience, and needing somebody there on the ground with me at that time, and having to be doing spreadsheets or writing a funding bid or justifying our organization and why we need this and why we need that, I find that very, very draining. But then you have to fill in the funding to find money to pay somebody to do that job. If you're not good at funding bids, Adira itself, as an organisation, I never apply for funding bids over £5,000, because the higher the funding, the thicker the application, and it has words in it that I just don't understand. So that's one of the issues that we have. Also, people who parachute in, especially since the death of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement, suddenly all these predominantly white organizations are now parachuting in and wanting to work with Adira, and can we do this with Adira, and can we do that with Adira, and trying to use us as a tick box exercise, or as a, look, we're very diverse because we're working with Adira, which is a Black organization, look at us. That can be very, very frustrating. The fact that a lot of the funding that was out there before the George Floyd incident was going to predominantly white organizations, what I call the usual suspects, the bigger, more well-known ones. Organizations like ours couldn't get a look in, but the death of George Floyd has shone a spotlight on health inequalities, race inequalities, the fact that small grassroots, I hate the word BAME because it just plums us all together, but small grassroots BAME organizations are now having funding that's ring-fenced for them. Look at that. We can now apply for funding that just says, I saw some funding the other day from the lottery that just said, this is for the Black community. If you're not Black, do not apply. And long may this live. We don't know how long this window of opportunity is going to be open for, but long may it carry on. Those are some of the things that we struggle with. When we do ask for help from places like Voluntary Action Sheffield, that are meant to help grassroots organizations, they say, oh yes, we can help you, but this is going to be the cost. Where are we supposed to get that funding from in the time that we actually need it? So those are some of the things that we face and we struggle with. We struggle with organizations who say, come to us. Oh, come over here to the Samaritans, or come over here to this organization that's predominantly white, by the way, because we're doing this over here. No, you come to us. This is the issue that the Black community have. Stop asking us to come to you. If you want to help us, you come to us. If somebody stabs me, this is some analogy I use all the time. If somebody stabs me in my back and then says, sorry, they stabbed me and the knife is in there 10 inches and you pull it out 3 inches and then say, well, I'm sorry. The knife is still in my back. You've pulled it out by 3 inches, but it's still in my back. Pull it out another 7 inches and say, sorry, it's still in my back. So it's not just about these organizations saying, oh, we're sorry, and we want to make things better, but you're just doing the minimum required. And using organizations like ours, you need to put in the time, get some serious training in when you want to work with us. Stop asking us to come to you, come to us and ask us what it is that we need, because a lot of the damage that has been caused in terms of mental health in the Black community has been caused by predominantly white organizations who came in 20 years ago with a one-size-fits-all solution to mental health, to an organization, to a community that doesn't believe in mental health, and said, this is how we're going to fix you. When we didn't engage, we were then labeled as difficult to work with, difficult to engage with. It wasn't that we were difficult. You came in as a middle-class white person with a suit, tie, and a suitcase, and said, a briefcase, said, this is how we're going to help you. You didn't come and say, what is it that you need? This is another issue that we have. Ask organizations like us what it is that we need. Stop coming in and telling us, this is what you need, this is what we're giving to you, this is the amount, and this is what we want you to do with it, because that might not work for us. Sorry, I don't mean to go on.
I absolutely adore it when you go on. Thank you. Steph, I want to throw over to you. Lots of stuff coming out of what Ursula said there. There's stuff about, can established statutory organisations respect communities? Can you stay true to serving your community while taking money? Lots of stuff about strings attached, lots of stuff about being a doer rather than a fundraiser. Over to you.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, I echo so much there that Ursula has mentioned. In all the years that we've been going, we've never had any commissioned money. We've never had any cash from the NHS. We've had the odd sort of small grant from the local council, Sheffield in this case. And one of the things, I think Ursula said it very well, is we try to be, our mission, our passion, our drive, everything that we do is about where we come from. And that's within the community. And we want to keep it that way. So, you know, one of the things that we don't want to be ring-fenced into certain conditions. Well, yes, you can have this money, but you have to do this with it, or that with it. Actually, no, we want to do this, and we want it to be something that's, you know, grounded in the vision of what we wanted to do, and how we've always done it, which is one of the reasons where, so because of that, we have tended to miss out, I think, on funding that has been available. But when you actually look at the conditions for that funding, it's we can't do that. We actually need to do things in a way which is true to our original concept. Those people were getting together, doing things for themselves. And this is what people actually say, is the fact that when they come and get support with us, it's that sort of space where they can feel comfortable and safe. And, you know, we don't necessarily have to start talking about how many numbers do we get through the doors. You know, that's the sort of thing which I think it really prevents the original sort of mission of the grassroots organisations, and you go on a different tangent. I think that's where we don't want to go. And I think when I said before about not wanting to necessarily grow, we know many organisations who are large now, national, working in mental health, started off in a small way, and have become giants, and also get lots of critique, you know, around what they do. The more people you take on, the more money you need, and the more you have to feed that all the time. And I think that's one of the things where we've been fortunate in the fact that we've had some amazing volunteers that work with us now and have worked with us over the years. And just to be able to have that, and it is hard because volunteers and things come and go. And there is normally, for many of the groups, there's a core cohort of people who keep that group running, who keep it going, who go the extra mile, who do the extra, put in their own money, you know, that sort of thing all the time. And I think that's a difference. Now, you could say, well, shouldn't have to do that, but I think, you know, we do. You know, for me personally, you know, keeping Sod going and supporting women in Sheffield from all walks of life, you know, and I think that's one of the things which makes the, again, I use the magic term, magic, you know, it feels a little bit like that. And I think, you know, peer support, in all its sort of facets, really, you know, is an amazing thing. Yes, there are challenges. You know, we certainly have had, you know, things where it's gone a little bit pear-shaped at times, and we've nearly had to close, and so, but we've always managed to keep going. And I think, you know, having this, you know, again, like Ursula said, based within the heart of the community, doing the things that community and people want, not what other people want you to do, is absolutely key to keeping this going. You know, I think that's how we need to also still move forward, as well as what's happened in the past, and to have that where people do come to you, for things, not the other way around. And again, it's been said that typically it's you have to go out to find somewhere to find things. Now, hold on, these people are in the community. These are here. These are people who do have need, are struggling for lots of different reasons. And, you know, let's not sort of say, well, this is what you need to do. No, we need to do this. And that's that sort of fundamental aspects of the local small grassroots organisations, which do make so much difference, not always recorded in the way that it some of the funders like it to be recorded. And one of the things that I did once was I had somebody who was a university dean, and she was also on a funding panel. And I said, well, rather than me filling out the forms, why don't you actually just come down and actually talk to the ladies, talk to the people in the support group, and ask them what they feel about it. And she did, actually. Very rarely it happens, but she actually did. And I think she was amazed also at the fact that actually these people were saying things like, you know, this has saved our life, this is so powerful, and we don't know what we would do without it. Okay. But actually can see that, not just in a virtual world or on a piece of paper, you know, making that sort of link, really, you know, for local organisations. And I think doing those things, you know, now and in the future, and making people aware, having that higher profile of how important small groups, small organisations are in this context, is something we need to do a lot more. And I will big up NSUN here a little bit as well. Obviously, having a national network to help support those small grassroots organisations is also extremely, extremely important. So I'll just leave it there, Mark. Thanks.
Fantastic. Lots of stuff to chew over there. We've got volunteers and passion. We've got the question about whether you actually do want to grow. We've got stuff around doing stuff for ourselves, not what other people want us to do. Really big thing coming from what Steph said about people outside of your community not understanding what user-led organisations actually do. And also, and this is a lovely segue, a little bit about progression, like where do things go to? So over to you, Shuranjeet, to chew all of that over. Where are you at? What you need? And what's difficult for Taraki?
Awesome. Thank you, Mark, and thank you to Ursula and also Steph for forwarding the points that I was also really thinking about. I really connected with what was mentioned about you know, understanding not only it's not just the fact that funding's there, but it's once you've got the funding, you know, how are we going to be able to manage that alongside doing our day-to-day activities and, you know, all the other work and different roles that people have in their lives, how are we meant to work with that funding effectively to actually support the work we're doing. And also then what you mentioned, Steph, around how you're able to communicate the messages of what you're doing to people who are, you know, potentially working at a broader level, because oftentimes the work of localized initiatives can just become co-opted. It can be absorbed by bigger organizations. And, you know, that's something that we've seen as well. When we started off, me being naive, reached out to slightly larger organizations to see if they wanted to work together and never got an email reply. And so that was the first thing I learned. It was, you know, don't rely on others and, you know, don't rely on institutions to actually get you going. And so we were lucky enough to kind of get going ourselves and get going through the love and the care of our volunteer team. And suddenly, you know, a couple of years down the road, you have these same organizations we emailed who are contacting us and asking us to get involved with things, or are contacting us and asking us to help to ensure that their services or their work could reach communities who they cannot get to. And so I think that was that's something that kind of came forward. But what I want to focus on is something I've been thinking a lot about recently, and everything Ursula and Steph said are things that I also kind of think are really, really important. But what I want to think about is how people within user-led organizations think about working together and working to create a system that is encouraging people to flourish, rather than actually perpetuating the systems that actually seek to harm us. So the systems I'm talking about are, basic things around what people would call management, what people would call like collaborative teamwork, because we see that our ways of doing things have been informed by systems that look to extract as much as they can. When we look at different parts of our world, different parts of our society, we see ways of managing, ways of working with people that don't focus on nourishing that person themselves, but focus on extracting as much surplus value as it can from these individuals. And so for me, the one thing I do not want to be, and the one thing that I ask myself every single day is, are we an organization that professes to talk about mental health, but we're no good for the mental health of our volunteers? Every day I ask myself, we're talking about looking at systems change. We're talking about wanting to take different approaches to how we relate to each other. But in my small everyday interactions with our team, am I reproducing those same systems? Am I reproducing those systems which reduce the people we work with to pockets of labor, or reduce them down to resources that can be exploited? So the small thing for me is thinking about how we can not only want to see change within our broader world, not only see change within our society more widely, but how we can take those steps within the everyday instances in our lives when we're working with each other, when we're engaging with people around us. Because moving forward, we need to imagine new systems of working together that are not founded on exploitation and that are not founded on extracting as much as you can from those around you. And I'm sure alternative systems do exist, but how do we learn off each other, and how do we talk about these things within user-led organizations? How can we all share the fact that we have made mistakes? How can we all share the fact that we have done things that we've regretted, but we've learned from them? Because when we're working within user-led organizations, confronting these limitations is key, in my opinion, to how we move forward. Pretending that the work we do is flawless is what got us into the current situation of organizations with a one-size-fits-all policy and a reluctance to engage with the people that they've excluded. And so I guess they're the two things that I'm trying to think about today, is how can we work with the people around us in ways that encourage them to flourish, rather than ways that try and exploit and extract as much as we can. And the second thing is, how can we create networks that are comfortable and honest about the limitations that we have in our work? And how can we actually work to learn from each other's experiences in that sense? It took me a long time to speak to someone who leads a user-led organization who is actually honest about how it worked. People can come and say to you, oh, you do great work, this is really good, all of this, all of that. They will never talk to you about the mistakes they made. They will never talk to you about the lessons that they learned, even though they're going to be there. And so really what I want to try and think about is how we can create that environment where we want to work for the nourishment of everyone around us. because I think user-led organizations have the potential to do things differently.
Awesome. I would like to, in the spirit of that, I would like to throw my hands up and say I am a massive bag of mistakes, and I'll tell you about them at great length anytime we meet in person. So what I'm hearing from that really is something that kind of speaks to a very foundational text for NSUN, which is the 2008 report, Dancing to Our Own Tunes. It sounds like we're talking very much about how we build relationships, how we build alternatives, how we build things that aren't alternatives, but are just things that people need, that are safe and they're nourishing, and how we make sure that user-led organizations and groups and community groups don't just become someone else's tool to do something. What they are is real, living, generative, growing, beautiful things in communities that are helping, supporting, and making stuff happen for people. So we've got actually about a quarter of an hour left. What I wanted to do is go to each of our panelists and get you to say very quickly, off the top of your head, what you would need in the world to change right now that would make things better or easier for your organization. And then we'll take some questions from the chat. So I am going to throw very quickly over to Steph. Off the top of your head, some quick things that you really need that would make a difference to what you do.
Okay, crikey, yeah, that's no pressure then. Thanks, Mark. So I guess on top of my head, yes. I mean, interesting talking about the system and the changing of the system, and I think when we talk about the more radical sort of expression of local communities actually shouting a bit more is something which is probably needed even more, but also the fact that, do we have to keep doing that all the time? I don't think we should have to. I think there should be much more recognition of, a genuine recognition of the local small groups, however they're formed, whether they're a formal organisation or they're people getting together, as a mutual aid, to be able to, really understand what we're doing and making sure that we have that recognition of that it does actually matter. I think for me, and the frustrations that I've had and we've had with trying to sort of fight the system really and try to get people to listen to what we need as communities is exhausting, if I'm honest. It's very, very tiring, and it probably saps a lot of your energy and your soul a lot of the time. Yes, we're still going. Yes, I'm still going, and still got to fight. We're still fighting the system, and it's the same thing that happens, I guess, over time and time again with statutory organisations, the wider system in which we live in. And I think it's something which, yes, we still need to fight. We still need to have that, but there needs to be that recognition of where we are in this and what the contribution make the small grassroots organisations actually make and supporting people, families, communities within this world that we're living in. Not just obviously now, it's a very difficult time for many people and for us, and trying to keep this going. And I think money isn't necessarily the only thing. Because we do talk about money all the time. We need money to keep going, etc. But actually, we don't so much. I think it's really the recognition, I think, of organisations, what we do, how we do it, why we do it, because that's where it comes from. And that's at the heart of everything that certainly we do, that I do, and that's why I'm still here. I personally work, freelance as well, doing lots of other things. but actually the drive and why I'm still here, and the passion and that sort of sense of, you know, people still need this this support within the community, and currently crying out for support. You know, why should we be here if the system actually does it in the right way, but we know it doesn't. And so I think keeping that, having that sort of in mind is something which fundamentally for me is where we need to think about the history, but also the future, where we're going to more collective, more collaboration, more partnership, you know, more sort of joint, larger voices coming together to actually make this happen in a way which people will listen, and also recognise the fact that we have such a huge impact into people's lives for the better. I think also recognising the fact, of course, it doesn't always go right, and we also need to recognise some of the challenges and some of the blips that we have along the way, along our journey, and to keep that momentum going. So that was very, very briefly sort of top of my head sort of stuff. So some of the core things, Mark, I think, really.
I very much enjoyed that view from the top of your head. Ursula, I'd like to bring you in. What do you reckon? What do you need right now that would make a difference?
Okay, I'll be quick. One of the things I've learned personally, is that if you need something, go and get it. And don't rely on other people. I love what Sanjeet said, that at the beginning, when he tried to set up his organization, he went to these people and, you know, couldn't get a seat at the table. So one of the things we're doing, because this is what we need, there is no safe space for us in the Black community. Your spaces, these predominantly white spaces, are not safe. They're not culturally appropriate. They're not culturally sensitive enough for us. So what we need is our own space. And I'm somebody that if I mention something, believe me, 50% of it is done by the time I open my mouth and say I'm doing this or thinking of this project. So we are in the process of getting a building, which is a one-stop shop for the Black community. It will have everything we need in there with the Black community, because we don't do mental health. It has to be carrot and donkey in your approach, but the carrot has to be right to get the donkey to eat it. So we are looking at getting a building, which is the hub for the Black community. We will have a dance studio, an art therapy studio, a music studio, a community kitchen, a place for our elder Black people to go and play dominoes. Dominoes is vicious in the Black community. It's war, the older people and their dominoes. We will have a community garden. We will have a walk-in mental health center. It will also be a training center. They will have a hair salon. It will have a barbershop, because those are our therapy rooms. That's where we will pour our pain, in the hair salon and the barbershop. What we won't tell a therapist, or we won't tell a doctor, I'll tell to my hairdresser. This building will be something where a Black person can walk in and they'll say, listen, I'm struggling, but I'm not mad and I don't need to see a therapist, but I love cooking. Okay, second floor. Somebody else will walk in and say, oh, my mom's doing my head in, Mama Ursula, because that's what the young people call me in our community. You know, she's getting on my nerves, but I love music. Okay, basement. Because while they're doing these things and they're, you know, mixing that tune, or they're cooking, they'll be yapping and my dad gets on my nerves. And, you know, my mom, or they'll be saying, you know, while they're doing the garden, I found a lump in my breast, but you know, these white doctors, they don't understand us. I'm not going to see no white doctor about it. He won't get it. Actually, on the second floor, we have a Black doctor. Go up there and see him. Somebody else will be in the kitchen, you know, cooking and be saying, oh, I've got problems with my rent, you know, and I think the bailiffs are coming and I'm trying to talk to the council, but they don't understand because I need my hair doing. And as a Black person, they don't understand that that's what my priority is now, not my rent. I wish I could see somebody who understood me. Well, CAB coming once a month, and the person who comes from Citizens Advice is Black and he's on the 5th floor. Go and see him. That's what we're in the process of. We have got Grant Thornton helping us with that. We have got the NHS looking at giving us the building. We have got South Yorkshire Housing Association, who have said that they will manage the building for us for free entirely. Somebody else has said they will write our funding bids for the building, because I don't want the NHS to fund it all, because I don't trust them and I don't want them to have too many fingers in our pie. So that is what we are doing. In terms of what we need, we're going out there and we're fixing it. We're finding it, the solution ourselves. That solution is that building. It will also be a walk-in center for people with mental health issues. It will also be an events hall for our rites of passage, where we can have our 9 nights, which in the Black community is so important to us. When somebody dies, we have 9 nights of mourning. Leading up to the burial. These things are important to us. Our weddings, our christenings are very much cultural events, and they need to be done in a cultural way. So this will be a one-stop shop for the Black community. And we're not saying everybody else is shut out, everybody else is excluded. We're saying if you want to do something, come to us in this building. You want to do something around lupus, which specifically affects the Black community, don't ask us to come to the Northern General. It's not happening. Come to us in this building. You want to do something around cancer, which we don't talk about in the Black community. We call it the big C. We're not going to come to you. Come to us in the building. That's what we're doing in terms of what we actually need.
Awesome. Right, we are running really close to the end of this session. I just wanted to kind of quickly get something from Shuranjeet, and then I've got 1 or 2 questions to ask you, and we're going to have to answer them really, really quickly together. So, Shuranjeet.
Awesome, no worries, I will be quick. Ursula, thank you so much for outlining, all the amazing kind of, it's very similar to something, shout out my mom again, very similar to something she said is when you talk about something, it's not something that you're gonna do, but it's something that you've basically done or you're in the process of getting done. So really connected with that. So in terms of our perspectives and what we kind of quote unquote need, for me, it's thinking about how we can continue to do the work that we're doing, which because of the fact that we haven't had a lot of resources in the past, is really low resource. So we can do the work that we're doing at the moment with, with hardly any resources, because we know how to get these things done. We know the places to have our events. We know the different things to do so that we can ensure that it's a very low resource process for us. And so I guess for me, it's being comfortable with the fact that resources can help, financial resources and different kinds of resources can help to don't want to say scale, because scale is a very kind of like corporate word, but it can help to support the next phase of what we're doing. And so it's going to be really important for us to figure out how that happens, and really important to figure out how we can do that in a conscientious way, how we can use the resources that might be available to us to ensure that, I don't necessarily have to work, 2 or 3 jobs alongside this work as well as doing my studies, and me being comfortable with that. And so I think we can work towards that situation, because it requires having that kind of faith to take that leap. And I think that's the main thing that's on my mind for us at the moment.
Brilliant, thank you. So actually we've got about 5 minutes left. We've got a couple of questions from the chat that we might need to leave hanging a little bit, unless any of you can jump in very, very quickly. The questions are about, one is, what about areas where there aren't user-led organisations, rural areas, coastal areas, places outside of big cities? How would we start them? How would we get things going in those areas? The other question is about, a lot of the stuff we've been talking about has been about practical doing and making things happen. And the question that the person asked was, does that mean that we can't do activism as well? Does activism get lost if we focus on meeting people's basic needs? I'm just going to have to ask you to take maybe 1 or 2 minutes each, if you've got any thoughts on that, and then we'll have to finish up today. So, any thoughts, Steph?
Okay, yeah, so sorry. One of the things which we have had in Sheffield actually is what was called the SHIP project, which was some funding that came down, sort of led by someone, again, with lived experience, helping start up small user-led groups. Unfortunately, that sort of went by the wayside. It sort of sailed, as it were. But I think one of the things that, and again, you've seen the sort of examples here is where people have started up these things themselves. That's a group of people, individuals, you know, have taken the lead, whatever it might be. And I think having those people within those communities where maybe in more rural areas, more sort of coastal areas, those sorts of things, it's easy to say, well, you know, well, start something up, you know, start something up yourself. But actually, sometimes I think there does need to be some support there as well. And I think on a national basis, I think actually that's something which something like NSUN could actually sort of like, I think personally help with, having sort of like a program or something like that to actually help support that sort of development. Because sometimes people have come to me and asked about, I want to set something up, how do I do it? And I sort of say, well, wow, you know, like Ursula said, well, just go and do it. Absolutely, make it happen, and they have, which is great. But there are other things to consider. Absolutely. So I guess, you know, trying to have something where we have more of a collective again, having those things which can make a catalyst, if you like. So doing those things as well as organisations or people starting things for themselves. So yeah. That's something which hopefully we can do more of.
Brilliant, thank you. We've got about a minute left. So either Shuranjeet or Ursula, do you have a final 30 seconds of words to share with us?
Shuranjeet, you go for it.
Awesome. So just to very quickly comment on the question around activism and also kind of supporting basic needs. The way I see it, our drive to kind of work towards activism is like a flame inside us. There are going to be some instances where we might be doing things that are looking at supporting basic needs, but we do things in our lives. We engage with people. We have presence of people we trust. We have presence of things that we enjoy that keeps that flame going. And so we know we're all in a very kind of strange situation at the moment. We might be focusing on basic needs, but it's about keeping that flame going, because when we emerge out of this into a world that isn't, back to normal, because as someone on the NSUN blog said, do we really want to go back to normal? We are in a position where that flame is still going. And for me, I always ask myself, do I want to just do this for the next 3 months or 3 years? No, I want to do this for the next however long it takes in my life. And so with that in mind, that flame needs to continue burning. And so I do that by looking after myself, but also by making sure that we can respond to things as well as keep that flame going.
Brilliant. I think that's an amazing point to finish on. I would like to think that there's lots of tiny flames or even big flames keeping people warm across the country now, and I hope that we'll see more of them. And with that kind of final thought, I will draw our meeting to an end. I'd just like to thank all of our panelists. I'd like to thank Shuranjeet. I'd like to thank Ursula. I'd like to thank Steph. I'd like to thank NSUN for the opportunity to make this happen. I'd really like to thank Rosie, our BSL translator, and the rest of the NSUN team. So that's it. Go off and enjoy the rest of our AGM. Thank you. I think we might be about to stop recording, which would be great, and also broadcasting live.